Hello, everyone. Hello. Can everyone hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good evening from Beijing. I'm Xinhua Guo from Tsinghua University. It is my greatest honor to host this keynote session. In this session, we have with us a distinguished speaker, Professor Jansen. Professor Jansen is a principal scientist in the social computing group at the Qatar Computing Research Institute. He is professor in the College of Science and Engineering at Hamad bin Khalifa University, an adjunct professor at the College of Information Science and Technology at the Pennsylvania State University. He is a graduate of West Point and has a PhD in computer science from Texas A&M University. Professor Jansen is the editor-in-chief of Information Processing and Management. He has served as a senior fellow at the Pew Research Center with the Pew Internet and American Life project. He has authored or co-authored about 300 research publications on an extremely wide range of journals and conferences. Today, in this session, Professor Jansen will share with us a very important and attractive topic, that is, science depends on numbers about people, but the numbers are probably wrong. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Professor Jim Jansen.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me. And yeah, I appreciate the schedule looks really good, and I know I'm the last speaker for the day, so I will just go ahead and get started here. And let me 1 second. Can I get a heads up that this is showing for somebody?
Not showing yet, Jim.
Okay. All right.
Screen sharing, it just hasn't come up yet.
Yes.
Might want to try again.
Yeah, 1 second. Let me try it again. Someone's dog. Yeah.
Now it's up.
Okay. Still there?
It is. It's in presenter mode at the moment.
Okay. Sorry. Try one more time.
Perfect.
All right. Third time's a charm here. Yeah, look like I put my PhD in computer science to use here. So I'm going to just on the, well, I'll just keep video up for a short time unless there's a problem. So yeah, what I want to, my presentation, which I hope you'll find interesting, and I think it's a major problem in our field. It concerns the issue of numbers, and numbers being, especially when they deal with people, generally wrong. You know, science has a desire for numbers. What you're reading here is a famous quote by Lord Kelvin, famous for the Kelvin scale and for the second law of thermodynamics. And basically, the gist of this position that has really permeated science is that if you don't have a number, you really don't understand the phenomena, and it's really not science. And this is I put forth a predominant field or a predominant viewpoint in science. I did want to point out, though, that this very important statement is not expressed in numbers, that it is expressed using words. Right. I started my academic career, though, focused on analytics, numbers, quantitative approaches, both statistic and algorithmic. But I soon realized that numbers by themselves were often inadequate. And so I then incorporated terms, qualitative methods for really a mixed method approach, using both numbers and words in my teaching and in research. However, again, as a researcher and a teacher, I soon realized that in many situations, words were actually better than numbers. An example. Let's say you have a teaching objective to get across the point that the Egyptian pyramids are very old. One way to do that is in numbers. Okay, the pyramids at Giza were built around 2500 BC. I think that's a yawner, okay? That would not stick with me at all as a student. What if we give it some words to give it context? How about this? When the Egyptians built the pyramids at Giza, woolly mammoths still roamed the earth. I mean, to me, wow, that's old. Okay, so I think an example, words really give the context that numbers by themselves just cannot. Then I went to from realizing that numbers were inadequate to often numbers were just wrong. And by wrong, I'm not referring to some of the many known data collection and analysis issues, even though I think they have a bearing. So let me just talk on a couple because they do relate to the problem I'm discussing. Here's an example of a known issue. Okay. You have a city that wants to deploy its police to areas where crime occurs. Okay, very reasonable. The city's got data on the number of arrests, so they deploy police to those areas. Arrests in those areas go up. Does that mean the crime has went up in those areas? No, it doesn't. Okay, this is an example of the proxy problem. Using the data of arrest to try to somehow correlate with crime. But arrests are also a function of police, okay? There may be just as much crime in other areas, in corporate headquarters, in government offices. Maybe there's just less police there, right? This is an example of the proxy problem. Here's another known issue. This is actually not hypothetical, it actually occurred. During World War II, the United States had a very sophisticated statistical research group. And one of the questions they were asked during the war was to figure out how much armor to put on planes, okay? This is kind of an optimization problem because you want the planes to have enough armor to keep them from getting shot down, but not too much armor because the armor adds weight, more fuel, less maneuverable, slower, easier to get shot down, that kind of stuff. So they wanted the optimal amount of armor to armor planes, and they had data, okay? They had data on all the places where the planes were being shot, okay? And you see them here in this diagram. All these little red holes are where bullet holes where these planes had got shot down or got shot. All right. So they want to know how much armor to put there. All right. Well, and these are the locations. Well, what the group responded back is don't armor those places at all. Armor these places, okay, where there are no bullet holes. And this is an issue of the missing data problem, right? These were the planes that made it back, okay? These were the planes that didn't make it back. So what the statisticians, being alert, realized they had missing data, and all the planes that were getting shot in these areas where there were no holes were, getting shot down and not making it back, and therefore the U.S. Air Corps had no data for this. Okay, known problem, missing data problem. These are not the problems I'm referring to, but though they do relate in some ways. All right, what I'm referring to are situations where the numbers are just wrong, and in my experience, from entirely too many years in academia and industry, that many of the times the numbers that we are dealing with people are just wrong. Here's some examples from our recent U.S. elections. Okay, U.S. holds major elections every 4 years. We have primarily two major parties: the Democrats, the Blue Party, and the Republicans, the Red Party. In these major elections, we elect the president, we elect a lot of the members of Congress, a lot of governors, and many, many other offices, from state legislatures down to town sheriffs, okay, called down ballots. We hold these elections every 4 years. All right. Prior to the last couple of elections, the polling data, and especially in the election we just had this year, polling data predicted a major wave for the Blue Party. In other words, the Blue Party would score major wins. What actually happened? Wrong. All the data was wrong. The Blue Party eked out a narrow victory. Narrow victory. Social media data. The volume and velocity of social media data predicted major support for the Red Party. What actually happened? It was totally wrong. The volume of social media posts was inversely correlated to the number of votes the candidate got. Okay. Think how much social media data is published in just our field alone. Okay, what if it's all wrong? Another example, buying data. This image you're seeing here is an image from the New York Times, came out the week before the election. Economic data from wholesale warehouses in China showed major support for the Red Party. Again, wrong. The volume of merchandise sold for a particular candidate was inversely proportional to the number of votes that candidate got. All these numbers that I just showed you are about people, their behaviors, all wrong. Okay. Let me give you an example closer to home, closer to our area, perhaps. Web analytics research. I have a particular research project that I'm going to focus a little bit of detail on. You see it here. We looked at data quality and web traffic, okay, 86 websites, and we compared 2 different analytic services. I just want to point out that many of the thoughts and ideas in this presentation are due to discussions with 2 of my great colleagues, Sungo Jung and Yoni Solomon. Okay, so I just want to certainly acknowledge their contributions. Just a little background analytics. Okay, we look at data, and to measure, collect, we analyze, report in order to make some meaningful decision or some insight to that particular data. One particular area of analytics is web analytics, and they often look at different aspects of web traffic data. Okay, now how do we get this data? There are 3 general approaches. Website data, all right, so you get the data from a particular website that has some type of service or tracking mechanism on it. An example is Google Analytics, okay. You can also get network-centric data. In other words, not the sites, but the pathways between the sites, okay. An example are the internet service providers that provide this telecom linkage. And finally, you can do a user-centric approach, okay? That's typically done through browser plugins or some type of user studies. An example was ComScore. They have a large user panel. Now, each of these data collection methods have drawbacks, okay? On the website, that's great if you only are looking at one website, but often we researchers want to look at hundreds of websites or dozens of websites, okay? Single website services like Google Analytics do not suffice for that, right? The network-centric approach is great for the network, but you lose there's no tracking of behaviors on individual websites. The user-centric approach, you need millions of panel data, users, to get any statistical meaning for the web with, I don't even know how many websites there are, but trillions probably now. Now, there are services, okay, that do a triangulation of data, okay? Website data, network data, and user data. One particular example there of this approach is SimilarWeb. They take data from all three different points, use some very sophisticated algorithms. They employ dozens, if not hundreds of PhDs to triangulate this data, and then they sell their services as a competitive intelligence company. Now, by the way, triangulation is a very accepted academic approach for validating research results. Okay, and actually, you would think from a research standpoint that this triangulation of data would be the best approach. So anyway, that's kind of the background. So what do we do in this study? Okay, we compared Google Analytics, the industry standards site-centric web analytics service, with SimilarWeb, the industry standard competitive intelligence service. And our question was, how do the two results compare between these two services? And that was what is published in this this particular research paper, hopefully, to get published soon, but currently under review. Now, why is this important? Well, many reasons, but one is, example is digital advertising. It is expected to hit just under $400 billion US in 2021, all right? And a lot of these advertising decisions are based on web traffic data provided by services like SimilarWeb or Google Analytics. Okay. By the way, I have no idea if these numbers that I'm showing you right now are correct or not. Okay, I'm just taking the word from this company, but this type of data is cited many times in peer-reviewed academic research. Okay, our methodology. What do we do? We use an open Creative Commons open source list called the Majestic Million. It's a list of the 1 million top websites on the web based on number of referring subdomains. We started at the top of this list and submitted each one to the SimilarWeb API, okay, Application Program Interface. We eventually located 86 sites that had both Google Analytics data and data from SimilarWeb. And we compared 3 very common, widely used analytics: visits, unique visitors, and bounce rate. I'll explain when we get to them what each of those are. So just so in case you're curious, on SimilarWeb, some websites have opted in to display their Google Analytics data, okay? So for each of these 86 websites in our study, we could access both the analytics from SimilarWeb and also Google Analytics. So you see it here. This is from their web page. We actually use the API. Okay. In case you're curious why a company would want to do this, sometimes if a company is being bought out, okay, they want verification of website traffic. Also for digital advertising, okay, if a company is looking at doing ads on a particular site, they'll want to know the traffic, and so this is a way to, to provide that data to the larger community if they're interested. It's challenging, as you see, it's challenging to locate. Out of 1 million, we ended up with 86 sites, so it's not a lot, and it's kind of challenging to get. So our results were that, from our research results, that the metrics differed for all three metrics for both. The results were statistically different for all three metrics between the two services. I'll show you here. So, by the way, we did this through a paired t-test for each site. We normalized using the box-Cox transformation. We did a paired t-test. As you see here, these were the results for the number of visits, number of unique visitors, and bounce rates. Okay, and what the results were from each particular service. And all three hypotheses were fully supported. We predicted that there would be a difference, and sure enough, there was. Now, this leads us to the next question of which approach is most right. Okay. There is no gold standard, all right, in case you're wondering. And that's usually the typical first response from academics. Okay, where's the gold standard? I can tell you from my experience, most gold standards and labeled data sets that deal with people are just wrong. I mean, you look at some of this stuff that's these labeled data sets, and I look at them and say, oh, did anybody even check this? And I think the answer is no, right? And so I think a lot of these gold standards are very questionable to begin with. However, to this question of which is the most right, by our analysis, they're both wrong. Okay, they do not represent actual human behavior. Let's look at two of the examples. Unique visitors. Okay, it's a common metric in web analytics. What do we think we're doing? Okay, we think we're measuring the number of people that come to a website in a given period. All right, so unique visitors in a month or a day or a week. That's not what we're doing at all. Okay. We're tracking a combination of browsers, cookies, tags, programs, all right? Has, I don't want to say nothing to do with people, but very questionable, okay, whether the data is accurate. In fact, I can almost assure you both Google Analytics and SimilarWeb are both inaccurate and imprecise, okay, wrong in their number of unique visitor counts. Here, as one example, these are all the possible sources of error that can be introduced based on the way we practically track unique visitors. Change computers, change browsers, clear cookies, go incognito, multiple devices, okay? All of these changes, okay, will cause an error in the unique visitor counts by either method, okay? Used either by Google Analytics or SimilarWeb. By the way, I have no idea if these numbers are correct, all right? None at all. All of these have been cited in peer-reviewed research, though, every single one. Let's look at another metric, bounce rate. This is what we think we're measuring. Again, the bounce rate is a very common web analytics metric. It's when a person comes to a website and leaves before doing anything meaningful, before any meaningful interaction can occur. Okay, that's conceptually. What are we actually doing? It's a bounce is a visit where there's an entry action, but no exit action. Let me explain that by giving 3 examples. A person goes to the New York Times website by accident, immediately leaves and goes to the New Yorker website. Okay, first bullet. The second one. A person goes to the New York Times website, spends 15 minutes reading the headlines and the article snippets, but does not click on a link. Third example, person goes to the New York Times website, leaves the computer for 31 minutes, comes back, clicks on one article, reads it, and then leaves the website. Conceptually, the first session is a bounce. These other two, we would conceptually count those as, oh, these are good sessions, okay? Visitor coming to the website, doing exactly what I want them to do, read content. Practically, they're all bounces because there's no exit points, okay? And actually, this last bullet is 2 bounces because it's 2 sessions, okay? Most analytics platforms have a time limit. If there's no interaction within 30 minutes, they'll count it as a new session. So practically all of these are bounces. For both Google Analytics and SimilarWeb, their method of calculating bounces are certainly inaccurate, perhaps imprecise, okay? Definitely wrong. As far as I know, there is no practical way to determine a bounce conceptually. So from our research, okay, for both Google Analytics and SimilarWeb, the industry standards in their field, okay, for all 3 major web traffic metrics, both approaches are wrong. Right? Now, what's the problem and what's the solution? Let me start with the problem first. A lot of times we present people numbers as if we're counting. In reality, we are often measuring. And whenever you measure something, it has several sources of error. Okay, sampling methods, implementation methods, problems with whoever's doing the measuring, problems with the measuring instrument, problems with how to analyze the metrics. Now, you know, there are other problems also, but I think this measuring counting thing is a major problem that is leading to a lot of these numbers being wrong. In fact, if you going back to their quote from Lord Kelvin here, you know, he specifically mentions the measuring aspect and why that's so important and perhaps why it's so challenging. Now, what's the solution? I wouldn't say this is a solution, but it's at least a mitigation, okay? We should not present numbers for measuring as if we're counting, okay? You know, I grew up on a small farm in Wilson County, Kansas. We raised chickens. I can count, you know, a couple dozen chickens. That's pretty easy to do. Counting millions of people on the web, okay, you can't count. It's got to be measuring. It's very challenging to do, okay? But a lot of times I think we conceptually think that, you know, we're counting we're counting those chickens, okay? I think also we need to report error rates. And this is challenging because, well, like on my research, okay, I just reported the results. I didn't report the error rates because the paper would probably get rejected if I reported what these error rates were. Look at this, okay? Visitor rates, you know, 20% error rate. I mean, I just have no idea. Unique visitors, certainly at least 30%. Bounce rate, error rate unknown. Okay? But that's the truth, okay? That's the truth. So I reported numbers from these metric services. When you dig into them, peel back the onions, they're wrong. So some takeaways. Numbers about people always should be viewed with a great deal of skepticism. I almost discount anything. Anytime I read social media data, I almost just discount it. It's got to be done very skeptically. always check if you're counting or measuring. Okay, measuring is very difficult to do, especially in these online environments. Finally, if you're measuring, be cognizant of the sources of error and report them. You know, here are 3 takeaways. Okay, that's counting. Okay, fairly easy. Again, measuring, much harder to do. So back to our Lord Kelvin quote. Yeah, you know, numbers are very good. Okay, we need them for science. We need them for decision making. But the numbers are only good if they're right. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jansen. Yeah. So, now we start the Q&A part. So, everyone, if you have any question, so you can put it in the chat box, and so we can go over the questions. So, Professor Jansen, may I ask the first question? So,
please.
I think you have brought out this very important problem. So can you give us some comments about what are the possible solutions? So if we know that there are these problems in the numbers, is there any approach that can help us to better estimate the possible error rate, error ratio of these numbers, and so that they can help us to better handle it?
Yeah, well, I wish I had the total solution, all right, but I can give a practical thing that I think we can all do in our field of information science, computer science, the informatics fields. You know, a lot of times we don't do, if you look in our research papers, we don't do a self-critique. You know, we don't do the theoretical implications, the practical implications. Our shortcomings, our limitations are almost boilerplate, content-free. I think, in this particular research they did, you know, we actually spent a great deal of time comparing what the practical measures that we did with conceptually what we were trying to do. And that really opened up, you know, some insights into the error rates of the absolute numbers, right? So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is that even when the numbers are wrong between 2 devices, for 2 approaches, or a practical approach or conceptually, a lot of times they are correlated in some way. So you can do things like a Spearman's correlation, and it doesn't correct the error, but it at least gives you an idea that, oh, I'm trying to rank these websites. Okay, the traffic may be off, but guess what? I did it through 3 different methods, and the rankings were all kind of similar. Okay, now that doesn't really prove anything in terms of it being right. It may be, you know, all 3 measurement methods may be wrong, but at least gives you an idea that there is, you know, some correlation going on, and it may help a little bit. But I think my first point's what I would really advocate. I think our field needs to do a little bit better on self-analysis of the research we do, and also going with that, be understanding when researchers say, hey, I just reported this data, but guess what? There's substantial error rates in the methods, but it's the best we have at the moment.
Yeah, so regarding the example of the web traffic analysis, so do you think it is possible that we can move closer to counting through with some method? Is it possible? So is there any new techniques or approaches that may help us to do counting instead of measuring, so that the number can be more reliable?
Yeah. There are methods being done to improve the way we're doing the current tracking. Okay. So that will help some. And what I mean by that, let's take the bounce rates. Okay. They're working on things where your web page constantly pings the server. All right. So then they'll be able to tell at least when you close the browser. I think that's going to introduce other problems like longer sessions. You know, I'm a person that leaves 200 tabs open all the time, and eventually once every couple of weeks going to trim them down as by reading articles and stuff. So are those websites going to be pinging the entire time? They have done also progress in terms of not using my devices, but trying to correlate my behaviors across devices by using things like information from routers and access points. It has bumped into some serious privacy issues. And so all companies have kind of backed away from it, even though the technology is kind of there to do it. And what I mean by that, I have, looking around, I have 6 computing devices. Well, they all go through, this wireless device, okay? The person that has access to that wireless device can know all these devices are mine. But again, it has some severe privacy issues. So there's nothing on the near term that I know of, is the short answer. But I think the methods we're using now can get a little more precise, but there's nothing on the horizon to close the conceptual gap.
Okay. Actually, I have another question. So you mentioned that triangulation may be a possible way to improve the reliability of the numbers. So can you expand a little bit on this point?
Well, yes, triangulation is a very common research technique. Okay, so you got data from some data collection point, you come up with a result. You get data from another point, another collection method, you compare. And if you get the same results, it's typically like, oh yeah, okay, that kind of confirms, my viewpoint. And you typically try to do that with multiple data points or multiple data collection sites, multiple types of analysis. So, if you analyze something quantitatively and get a result, and then you analyze it qualitatively and you get the same result, oh, that's kind of good, right? And SimilarWeb is a company that does this. They're a startup, by the way. They just got, I think, their 3rd round of, 50 million, 500 million, a lot of millions, okay? All right. That's the approach they use, right? Interestingly, even though in academia we consider triangulation the preferred method, if you ask industry people, they'll say, "Oh no, Google Analytics will give you the best results, okay, for your websites." It's kind of counterintuitive. Here we have a very sound research approach. I kind of have mixed views about it. SimilarWeb has a user panel of, I think, 400 million people, a lot of people, 400 million. I think 400 million was the last thing I saw. Okay. So that gives you some great insights on user behavior. Okay. By the way, what's the problem with panel data? Okay. People sign up for it, then they use some other browser, or they don't let people track the stuff they don't want to see. All right. So, user panel data also has problems. But this triangulation, the industry people will say Google Analytics will give you the best results. So they kind of view that as the gold standard. All right. But again, as researchers, or if you're trying to buy companies, you need data from multiple websites, and so you have to go to these competitive analysis services. Even though the reported metrics, absolute metrics, are different, the correlation is positive. We did experiments between the two, and I think it was like 0.8 something in terms of ranking each of these sites by the different metrics. I'm sorry that didn't quite answer your question, but it was the best I could do.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah. So let's see, is there any question from the audience? So if you have any question, you can feel free to input it in the chat box.
You're muted, Jim. There you go.
Yeah, if I'm not hearing anything, yeah, that's fine, and feel free to drop me an email if something pops into your mind later. But I certainly appreciate the invite, and it's always great to talk with colleagues and stuff. And I certainly would appreciate any exchange or any thoughts you have, like, hey, if you thought about this, or even if you disagree with me, fine. It's it's what makes it fun. So yeah, please reach out. And again, thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So thank you for this wonderful talk. So if the audience, so if you have any question you want to discuss offline, so you may contact Professor Jansen later. So thank you, thanks to Professor Jansen again. So so this is the end of this session, and enjoy the good night. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.